Well, now let's look into each of these themes separately. The first one, cultural regions. Cultural region is a geographic unit based on characteristics and functions of culture. It looks into how are people and their traits grouped or arranged geographically. We tend to live in different ways in different places, so it tends to look into how are people different and where they are located geographically. Places and regions provide the essence of geography, so it delves into how and why are places alike or different, how do they mesh together into functioning spatial networks, how do their inhabitants perceive them and identify with them. So cultural regions are identifying regions which would have people living in more or less same cultural settings. And maps are the best tools to study these cultural regions. In fact, on Earth, groups of people could be identified living in certain way, making certain form of culture or making certain cultural types, and regions can be made based on that. Now, there are three types of cultural regions which can be identified: formal, functional, and vernacular. Let's look into each of these separately. The first one is formal cultural regions. These regions are areas inhabited by people who have one or more cultural traits in common. Example, French language region, or corn or rice producing region, regions where Christianity is being practiced, etc. Now, these examples are based on single cultural traits, but formal cultural regions are also based on multiple cultural traits, like Inuit region. Inuit region, when it's been carved upon, is based on the language, religion, economy, social organization, and type of dwelling. But we are just picking up these 5 or 6 factors in order to have that region carved. We can always have more factors into it, or we can have lesser number of factors included into it. So formal cultural regions are arbitrary creation. No two cultural traits have similar distribution. Greeks and Turks can be taken as different formal region based on religion. However, there are a lot of similarities between the two, like their religions are monotheistic. They have a patriarchal society. The kind of food which they enjoy, particularly shish kebab. So whether Greeks and Turks will be two regions depend on the person working on it, as well as the requirement of making a region. So these are pretty much arbitrary creation. These regions seldom have defined borders, rather they have cultural zones. As culture overlaps, so it is difficult to draw a sharp boundary. Formal regions also have core-periphery pattern. Moving away from the central core, the characteristics weaken and disappear. Thus, many formal regions display a core-periphery pattern, where a region can be divided into 2 sections easily. One near the center, where the particular attribute or the factor which has been taken to define the region, maybe language, religion, etc., are strong, and other portions of the region farther away from the core, called the periphery, where these attributes are weaker. For example, if a region is based on language, like English-speaking people, so right into the center, maybe 100% people will speak in English, but as we move towards the periphery, the attribute becomes weaker. It might be that 90% people speak English towards the periphery. So formal cultural regions go by a core-periphery pattern. So basic characteristic of formal cultural region is that these are arbitrary creation. They seldom have defined border, rather they have a cultural zone or a border region, and they possess core-periphery pattern. Second region, functional region. This is an area that has been organized to function politically, socially, or economically. Example, a city, state, trade area, bank district, school district, etc. These are not culturally homogeneous and may contain several different unrelated traits. Functional regions have nodes wherefrom the functions are directed, which means central points where the functions are coordinated and directed. For example, for a school district, the node would be Board of Education. For a state, the node would be the state capital. For a city, the node would be the city hall. The borders in functional regions are usually clearly defined, like metropolitan area, state, etc. However, not all functional regions will have clearly defined boundaries. Example, newspaper circulation area. The node for this region would be the plant where from newspaper is being published, but it will have an overlapping boundary with other newspapers too, especially towards the periphery. Functional cultural regions generally do not coincide spatially with formal region, and this disjuncture often creates problems for functional region. Example, Germany is an independent state, so this is a functional region which has a node in terms of its capital and act as a functional region. Whereas it is also a region based on the language. So German language makes it a formal region. But it extends beyond the functional region of Germany, meaning that outside Germany also that language is being spoken. In a nutshell, functional regions are not culturally homogeneous. Functional regions would have nodes in it, and the borders of the functional regions are usually clearly defined, though there are cases when we have the fuzzy border. Lastly, or the third one, vernacular region. This is a region perceived to exist by its inhabitants. These are evidenced by widespread acceptance and use of special regional name based on the physical expression of the land, like the valley or the hill, etc. 30 such different regions are identified by Wikipedia in the United States and Canada. Another very striking example could be outback region of Australia, which is associated with the physical expression of rugged topography with rocky red soil. Vernacular regions, like most regions, generally lack sharp borders. Vernacular region grows out of people's sense of belonging and regional self-consciousness. Many formal or functional cultural regions lack this attribute. As a result, are often far less meaningful for people.